On August 15, 2021, 4 women drove into Crater Lake National Park in a rented Subaru Outback with Oregon plates, a cooler of cheap rosé, and a reservation at Mazama Campground for 3 nights. 8 months later, one of them walked out of a Greyhound station in Klamath Falls, 47 miles south, barefoot, sunburned, and silent. The other 3 have never been found. Annalisa Ruiz was 24 years old when she stepped off that bus. She weighed 91 pounds. Her hair had been cut or torn to different lengths on each side of her head. She was wearing a men's flannel shirt size extra large that did not belong to her or anyone she knew. She had no identification, no phone, no shoes. She gave the Greyhound clerk her name. She asked to use a telephone. She called her mother in Stockton, California, and said 4 words. "Mama, I'm in Oregon." Then she sat down on a plastic chair in the station lobby and did not speak again for 11 days. The women she'd driven to Crater Lake with, Madonna Okafor, 25, Kenrick Yee, 23, and Selena Marsh, 26, remain missing. Annalisa knows where they are, or at least where they were. Investigators are certain of this. Annalisa's attorneys are certain of this. Her own mother, Carmen Ruiz, is certain of this. Annalisa will not say, not can't, won't. That distinction, the distance between inability and refusal, is where this story lives and where it refuses to resolve. To understand what happened at Crater Lake, you have to understand the lake itself, because the lake is not incidental to this story. It is central, geographically, psychologically, and in ways that investigators still struggle to articulate. Welcome back to another video on my channel. To protect the victims, the names and places in this story have been slightly changed. If you have a story of your own to share, make sure to do so using the link down below. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Crater Lake sits inside the collapsed caldera of Mount Mazama, a volcano that erupted and destroyed itself nearly 8,000 years ago. The eruption was catastrophic, 42 times more powerful than Mount St. Helens. It left a hole in the earth nearly 2,000 feet deep. Over centuries, rain and snowmelt filled it. No rivers feed the lake. No rivers drain it. The water comes only from the sky and leaves only through evaporation and seepage through volcanic rock. This means the water is among the purest on Earth. It is also among the bluest, a blue so saturated, so unnaturally vivid, that first-time visitors frequently describe a feeling of vertigo looking at it. Not the vertigo of height, the vertigo of color that doesn't seem possible in nature. The brain registers it as wrong, somehow, too blue, too deep, too still. The Klamath people, whose ancestral land this is, have stories about the lake that predate European contact by thousands of years. They called the mountain Giwas. The stories describe a battle between the sky spirit Skel and the underworld spirit Lao. The lake is Lao's dwelling place, the wound left when the mountain was destroyed in their war. The Klamath traditionally avoided the lake. They didn't fish there. They didn't camp on its shores. Some elders still don't visit. When a ranger at the park named Cordell Beecham was asked years later whether the Klamath stories were relevant to the investigation, he paused for a long time before answering. "Relevant isn't the right word," he said. "But when you've worked here long enough, you start to understand why those stories exist. The lake does something to people. I can't tell you what, but something." This is not a ghost story. 4 real women went to a real place and 3 of them are really gone. But the place itself, its depth, its isolation, its strange capacity to disorient, matters. It is part of the machinery of what happened. How, exactly, is one of many things Annalisa Ruiz will not explain. The trip was Madonna Okafor's idea. She was the organizer among them, the one who made restaurant reservations, who remembered birthdays, who built shared Google Docs for group trips with packing lists and activity schedules. She'd found the campsite on a travel blog and sent the link to the group chat in June. "Crater Lake looks unreal," she wrote, "like someone photoshopped the planet. We're going." Madonna was 25 and worked as a dental hygienist at a family practice in Elk Grove, California, a suburb of Sacramento. She was the daughter of Nigerian immigrants. Her father, Emeka, ran a logistics company. Her mother, Blessing, taught high school biology. Madonna was the middle of 3 children, the reliable one, the one who showed up early and stayed late and never forgot to call. She had a laugh that her roommate, Diane Quevedo, described as borderline dangerous. You could hear her from across a parking lot, Diane said. This big, full, completely unself-conscious laugh. She laughed like she didn't care who was looking. People would turn around and stare, and Madonna wouldn't even notice. Or if she noticed, she didn't care. I loved that about her. Madonna had been planning to apply to dental school in the fall. She'd been studying for the DAT in her spare time, flashcards spread across the kitchen table, highlighters organized by color. The Crater Lake trip was supposed to be a break, a last stretch of summer freedom before the grind of applications began. Kenrick Yi was the youngest of the group and the quietest. 23, born in San Francisco, raised in Vallejo after her parents' divorce. She worked part-time at a plant nursery in Davis and was taking community college classes toward a degree she kept changing her mind about. First sociology, then environmental science, then she'd talked about nursing. Kenny didn't know what she wanted, her mother, Lynn Yi, said, and I think she was starting to be okay with that. She used to beat herself up about it. Everyone else has a plan, Mom. But lately she'd been more relaxed, more herself. Kenrick was an amateur photographer, film, not digital. She'd brought 2 cameras to Crater Lake, a Pentax K1000 she'd bought at a thrift store, and a disposable Kodak waterproof. Neither camera has been recovered. The photographs she took that weekend, if they exist, have never been seen. Her father, Gerald Yi, keeps a print of the last photograph Kenrick posted to Instagram, a shot of the Subaru packed for the trip, the trunk open, the cooler visible. Madonna's arm blurred in motion as she loaded a bag. The caption read, "Road trip energy, see you in 3 days." It has been over 3 years. Gerald still hasn't changed his phone wallpaper from that image. Selena Marsh was the oldest at 26 and, by several accounts, the most complicated. She'd grown up in Redding, in the scorched northern end of California's Central Valley, the daughter of a long-haul trucker and a mother who left when Selena was 9. She was funny, sharp-tongued, and difficult in ways that people either loved or couldn't tolerate. She'd been fired from 3 jobs in 2 years, not for incompetence, but for what one former manager diplomatically called an inability to tolerate authority she didn't respect. Selena didn't have a filter, said her cousin Jolene Trujillo. She said exactly what she thought, exactly when she thought it, and she didn't care if it made people uncomfortable. Some people thought she was mean. She wasn't mean. She was just honest in a way that most people aren't built for. Selena and Annalisa had known each other the longest, since sophomore year at a continuation high school in Anderson, California, where both had landed after falling behind in traditional classrooms. They'd been inseparable in the way of teenage girls who recognize each other's damage. Madonna and Kenrick had come later, folded into the friendship through overlapping social circles in Sacramento. The 4 of them weren't a natural group. They didn't have matching energy or similar temperaments. Madonna was organized and warm. Kenrick was quiet and watchful. Selena was volatile and magnetic. Annalisa was careful, the one who de-escalated, who smoothed things over, who noticed when someone's mood shifted before they did. Annalisa was the glue, Jolene Trujillo said. Without her, I don't think those 4 would have stayed friends. She was the one who made it work. Remember that. Annalisa was the glue, the one who made it work, the one who held things together. She was also the only one who came back. They arrived at Mazama Campground on August 15th, a Sunday, and checked in at the registration kiosk at 4:47 p.m. The ranger on duty, a seasonal employee named Bridget Kowalski, remembered them because Madonna made her laugh. She was telling some story about getting lost on the drive up, and she was acting it out, the GPS telling them to turn and her turning the wrong way, and her friends were all groaning and she was just cracking up. She had this amazing laugh. I remember thinking, those girls are going to have a great time. Their campsite was number 217, a pull-through site near the D-Loop, partially shielded by mountain hemlock. They set up 2 tents, Madonna and Kenrick in one, Selena and Annalisa in the other. The campground was about 60% occupied that weekend. Neighbors on either side reported hearing music and laughter until around 11 p.m. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. On Monday, August 16th, the four women drove to Rim Village, the main overlook area on the south side of the lake. Park records show their vehicle entered the Rim Village parking area at approximately 10:20 a.m. They were photographed by another tourist, inadvertently, in the background of a family portrait taken at the Discovery Point overlook. In the photograph, all four are visible. Madonna in a yellow tank top, pointing at something across the water. Kenrick holding her Pentax to her eye, Selena sitting on the stone wall with her back to the lake, and Annalisa standing slightly apart from the others, looking not at the water but at the tree line behind them. That photograph, taken by a man named Rogelio Estrada from Medford who didn't know the women and didn't notice them until investigators contacted him months later, is the last confirmed image of all four women together. By Thursday, they were supposed to be home. On Friday, August 20th, Carmen Ruiz called her daughter's cell phone. It went to voicemail. She called again Saturday. Voicemail. She called Madonna, whose number she had from a previous trip. Voicemail. On Sunday, August 22nd, 1 week after the women had arrived, Carmen called the Klamath County Sheriff's Office and reported her daughter missing. "They asked me if she'd done this before," Carmen said later. "Gone off without calling. I said no. I said never. My daughter calls me every day, every single day. Even when she was in high school, she called me. Something is wrong." The deputy who took the report, a man named Dale Sizemore, noted it as a welfare check. 4 adult women, a week overdue from a camping trip, most likely explanation. Extended their stay, poor cell reception in the park, dead phones. "We get these calls all the time," Sizemore said. "Crater Lake has almost no cell service once you're off the rim. People go up there and drop off the map for a few days. 9 times out of 10, they show up with a dead battery and a sunburn." Sizemore dispatched a ranger to check campsite 217. The ranger, Cordell Beecham, arrived at 3:15 p.m. on Monday, August 23rd. The campsite was empty. The tents were gone. The fire ring was cold. There was no trash, no food, no personal belongings. But the Subaru Outback was still in the parking area at Rim Village, 3 miles away. It had been there since Monday the 16th. It had a parking ticket on the windshield dated August 19th. The doors were locked. Through the windows, Beecham could see a cooler in the back seat, a pair of hiking boots on the floor, and Kenrick Yee's disposable camera on the dashboard. He called it in. Within the hour, the tone of the investigation changed. Sergeant Nadine Prokop of the Klamath County Sheriff's Office was assigned as lead investigator on August 24th, 9 days after the women arrived at Crater Lake and 5 days after anyone had demonstrably seen them. Prokop was 41, a 17-year veteran who'd spent most of her career in property crimes and drug enforcement before transferring to investigations. She was methodical, deliberate, and had a reputation for not speculating until the evidence gave her permission. "Nadine doesn't guess," her colleague, Deputy Investigator Harlan Fossey, said. "She finds." There's a difference. The evidence at that early stage was contradictory and strange. The campsite had been cleaned out. Not abandoned, cleaned. The tents were gone, the sleeping bags, the personal items. Someone had packed up deliberately. The fire ring had been swept. This suggested a planned departure, not an emergency. But the car was still at Rim Village. If they'd packed up camp, why hadn't they driven home? Why leave the car 3 miles from the campsite with belongings still inside? And there was something else. The parking ticket on the windshield was dated Thursday, August 19th, 3 days after they'd parked there. But the campsite reservation ran through Wednesday the 18th. If they'd broken camp on the 18th as planned, why was the car still at Rim Village the next day? Prokop ordered the car opened. Inside they found the cooler, containing 4 bottles of rosé, now warm, a reusable grocery bag with trail mix and sunscreen, the hiking boots, women's size 7, later confirmed as Annalisa's, Kenrick's disposable camera, 7 frames exposed, a phone charger plugged into the cigarette lighter, no phone attached, and in the glove compartment, the rental agreement, signed by Madonna Okafor. Kenrick's disposable camera was processed within 48 hours. Of the 7 exposed frames, 4 were blurry or overexposed, shots of the lake that hadn't focused properly. 2 were portraits, one of Madonna making a peace sign at the overlook, one of Selena lying in the grass with her eyes closed, maybe sleeping, maybe pretending to sleep. The seventh photograph was different. It showed a trail, not one of the maintained park trails, but a narrow, unmarked path leading downward through dense hemlock forest toward the lake's edge. The angle suggested the photographer, presumably Kenrick, was standing at the top of the path, looking down. The path curved out of frame to the left. At the vanishing point where the trees were thickest and the shadows deepest, there appeared to be a shape. Something lighter than the surrounding forest. It could have been a rock. It could have been a person. The photo lab technician who processed the image flagged it, but noted the resolution of disposable camera film made enhancement nearly impossible. It was a shape. It might mean nothing. Prokop stared at that photograph for a long time. It bothered me, she said later. Not because of the shape. Could have been anything. It bothered me because the trail shouldn't have been there. I've worked in and around that park for years. I know the trail system. That path isn't on any map. And the angle of the shot, she wasn't just taking a picture of scenery. She was documenting something. She saw something she wanted to remember. What Kenrick Yi saw on that unnamed trail, whether it was the beginning of what happened to them or simply a detail that means nothing, has never been determined. But the photograph became central to the investigation, pinned to Prokop's office wall, stared at by dozens of investigators, enhanced by 3 separate labs, and analyzed by 2 forensic imaging specialists. The shape remains ambiguous. The trail was eventually located a half-mile east of the Cleetwood Cove trailhead, the only authorized route to the lake's surface. It descended steeply through old-growth forest to a rocky shelf approximately 300 feet above the waterline. The shelf showed signs of recent human activity, scuff marks on rock, a wrapper from a granola bar, brand matching the trail mix found in the car, and scratched into the surface of a flat volcanic boulder with what appeared to be a key or a sharp stone, 2 letters, C.M. Salina Marsh, or Crater Lake, or a coincidence or nothing. 2 letters scratched into rock. It could mean everything. It could mean nothing. In missing persons investigations, the distance between everything and nothing is often immeasurable. The search expanded rapidly. By August 26th, 11 days after the women's arrival and 2 days after Prokop took the case, the operation involved 37 personnel, sheriff's deputies, park rangers, a K-9 unit from Medford, and a volunteer search and rescue team out of Bend. They searched the authorized trails first, then the backcountry. Crater Lake's rim stretches 33 miles. Below the rim, the caldera walls drop almost vertically. Loose volcanic scree, old-growth forest clinging to impossible angles, rock faces that haven't been mapped because there's no reason to map them. No one goes down there. No maintained trail reaches the waterline except Cleetwood Cove on the north side. The lake itself is the problem. 1,943 feet deep. The deepest lake in the United States. The water temperature below the surface hovers in the low 40s year-round. A body entering that water would sink. The cold would slow decomposition. The depth would prevent recovery by any conventional method. If they went into the lake, Prokop told her team on day 3 of the search, we might never find them. We need to operate on the assumption that they didn't, that they're somewhere on land, somewhere in this park or nearby, and that there's evidence to find. The K-9 unit hit on 2 locations. The first was the unmarked trail from Kenrick's photograph. The dogs alerted at the rocky shelf where the initials were scratched. The second was a pullout on East Rim Drive, 4 miles from the Cleetwood Cove trailhead, where a dog named Rascal, a Belgian Malinois trained in human remains detection, sat down and barked once. HRD dogs, cadaver dogs, are trained to detect decomposition. A single alert doesn't confirm death, it confirms the presence of decomposition compounds. A person who bled heavily could trigger an alert. So could someone who'd been sitting in the same spot for an extended period in summer heat. But combined with the timeline, 11 days, no contact, no phone activity, no financial transactions on any of the 4 women's accounts, the alert changed the investigation's posture. Prokop requested and received authorization to treat the case as a potential homicide. I didn't want to be right, she said. I wanted to find 4 women who'd gotten lost on a hike and were embarrassed about it. But the evidence wasn't pointing there. The evidence was pointing somewhere else. She paused. The evidence was pointing down. Annalisa Ruiz's family did not wait for the investigation to find answers. Carmen Ruiz drove from Stockton to Klamath Falls on August 25th, the day after the search began, and installed herself in a motel room that she would occupy, on and off for the next 8 months. She was a small woman, 53, who worked as a bookkeeper for an agricultural supply company. She had raised Annalisa and her older son, Marco, alone after her husband left when Annalisa was 6. She was quiet, precise, and possessed a tenacity that investigators initially underestimated. "Mrs. Ruiz was in my office every morning at 8, Prokop said. Every morning. She didn't yell, she didn't cry, she didn't threaten. She just sat there and asked what we'd found. And if we hadn't found anything, she'd nod and say, 'Okay, tomorrow then.' And she'd be back at 8 the next day." Carmen brought things from home: Annalisa's high school yearbook, photographs, a list of every person Annalisa had dated or argued with or mentioned in passing over the previous 2 years. She'd compiled it herself, handwritten, 12 pages. "I know my daughter," Carmen told Prokop. "She didn't run away. She didn't wander off. Something happened to those girls, and my daughter's out there somewhere, and every day we don't find her is a day too long." She was right about one thing. Something had happened. She was right about another. Annalisa was out there. But the version of Annalisa who eventually came back was not the version Carmen was looking for. On April 19th, 2022, 8 months and 4 days after the women arrived at Crater Lake, a Greyhound bus from an unspecified origin pulled into the Klamath Falls station at 6:12 a.m. Annalisa Ruiz stepped off. The driver, a man named Wesley Groves, didn't remember her boarding. The bus had made 11 stops between Reno and Klamath Falls. She could have gotten on at any of them. Greyhound's ticketing records showed a cash purchase at the Reno station, buyer name left blank. She had no bag, no jacket, no shoes. The flannel shirt hung to her knees. Beneath it, she wore a pair of men's athletic shorts, also not hers, held up with a length of what appeared to be nylon cord. The clerk at the station, Maureen Aldape, was the first person to interact with her. Maureen had worked the early shift at the Klamath Falls Greyhound station for 9 years and had seen every kind of person come through those doors. She knew immediately that something was wrong. "She was just standing there," Maureen said, "right inside the door, not moving, not looking around, just standing. Her feet were filthy, black on the bottoms, cut up like she'd been walking on gravel, and she was so thin. I've never seen a person that thin who was still standing up." Maureen approached her, asked if she needed help. Annalisa looked at her, and this is the detail Maureen returns to, the one she can't shake, with an expression that Maureen could only describe as recognition without comprehension. "She looked at me like she knew what I was," Maureen said. "Like she knew I was a person, I was real, I was standing in front of her. But she didn't know what to do with that information, like she'd forgotten how people work." Annalisa gave her name. She asked for a phone. She called her mother. She said, "Mama, I'm in Oregon." Then she sat down. Carmen Ruiz was in Stockton when the call came. She drove to Klamath Falls in 4 hours and 37 minutes, a drive that normally takes 6. She has no memory of the trip. When she arrived at the station, Annalisa was still sitting in the same plastic chair. She hadn't moved. She hadn't spoken. She hadn't eaten the granola bar Maureen had offered or drunk the water Maureen had set beside her. Carmen knelt in front of her daughter. She took her hands. She said her name. Annalisa looked at her mother the way she'd looked at Maureen, with that same devastating combination of recognition and blankness. "Mama," she said, and then nothing. For 11 days, nothing. The silence was not absolute. Annalisa responded to basic commands: sit, stand, eat, drink. She allowed herself to be taken to Sky Lakes Medical Center, where she was admitted for dehydration, malnutrition, and what the attending physician, Dr. Renata Solis, described as severe psychogenic withdrawal. Physically, the findings were alarming. Her weight, 91 pounds, represented a loss of approximately 45 pounds from her pre-disappearance weight. She had stress fractures in both feet consistent with prolonged walking without adequate footwear. Her hands showed calluses in unusual places, across the tops of the fingers, along the outer edge of the palms. that a consulting orthopedist said were consistent with repetitive gripping or climbing. Her hair had been cut inexpertly with what forensic analysis suggested was a non-serrated blade, possibly a pocket knife. There were no signs of sexual assault, no defensive wounds, no ligature marks, but there was scarring on both forearms, parallel lines, evenly spaced, healed enough to suggest they were weeks or months old. Dr. Salas could not determine whether the scars were self-inflicted or inflicted by another person. The regularity of the spacing suggested deliberation either way. Annalisa submitted to the physical examination without resistance and without engagement. She did not flinch when touched. She did not react to the blood draw. She stared at a point on the ceiling and breathed slowly, evenly, as if she were somewhere else entirely. Prokop was at the hospital within 2 hours of Carmen's call. She stood in the hallway outside Annalisa's room and waited. She did not push. She did not enter. "I wanted to shake her," Prokop admitted later. "I had 3 missing women, 8 months of dead ends, and the one person who could tell me what happened was on the other side of that door. But I've been doing this long enough to know that the worst thing you can do is push someone who's not ready. You break them, you lose them, and then you lose the information too." She waited 11 days. On April 30th, Annalisa Ruiz spoke. She looked at her mother, who had not left the hospital room except to sleep in the parking lot in her car, and said, "I can't tell you where they are. Not I don't know, not I don't remember. I can't tell you." Carmen, who had held herself together for 8 months and 11 days, broke. And the investigation, which had been frozen since November, shattered open in a direction no one had anticipated. "I can't tell you where they are." Prokop heard those words from the hallway. She wrote them down in her notebook, underlined them twice, and drew a box around them. Months later, that page was still the one the notebook fell open to, the ink slightly smudged from how many times her thumb had pressed against it. The distinction mattered enormously. "I don't know" suggests a victim. "I don't remember" suggests trauma. "I can't tell you" suggests a choice, a reason, a calculation made by someone who possesses information and has decided, for purposes she will not disclose, to withhold it. Within 48 hours of Annalisa's first statement, Prokop convened a meeting with the district attorney's office, the FBI's field office in Medford, and a forensic psychologist named Dr. Ellis Weatherford, who had consulted on cases involving prolonged captivity and coerced silence. The question on the table was deceptively simple. Was Annalisa Ruiz a victim, a witness, or a suspect? "She could be all three," Weatherford told the room. "Those categories aren't mutually exclusive. A person can suffer tremendously, observe what happened to others, and participate in acts they'd never have committed under normal circumstances. Coercion does that. Captivity does that. Whatever happened in those 8 months, the person who came back is not the person who left. We have to talk to the person who came back." Annalisa spoke again over the following weeks, but only in fragments, only to certain people, and never about what Prokop needed to know. She told her mother she'd been away. She told Dr. Salas she wasn't in pain. She told a nurse named Gladys Tomlin that she liked the color of the hospital walls, a pale green, because it reminded her of water. "Not the lake," she clarified when Gladys asked. "Different water." She would not say what water. She would not say where. Prokop was eventually granted a formal interview on May 14th, 25 days after Annalisa's return. The interview was conducted at the sheriff's office with Annalisa's court-appointed attorney, a man named Oren Castillo, present. Carmen was in the waiting room. The interview was recorded. The recording runs 1 hour and 43 minutes. Of that, Annalisa speaks for approximately 12 minutes total. The rest is Prokop asking questions, waiting, rephrasing, waiting again. Portions of the transcript were later made public through court filings. What follows is drawn from those portions. Prokop: "Annalisa, can you tell me where you were between August 2021 and April 2022? Ruiz: "No response. 14 seconds of silence. Prokop: "Were you in Oregon during that time? Ruiz: "Some of it." Prokop: "Some of it. Where else?" Ruiz: "No response." Prokop: "Were you with Madonna, Kenrick, and Selena during any of that time?" Ruiz: Long pause. "In the beginning." Prokop: "In the beginning. What does that mean? The first days? The first weeks?" Ruiz: "I don't want to talk about time." Pro Cop. Okay, can you tell me if the others are alive? Ruiz. 17 seconds of silence. I can't tell you that. Pro Cop. Can't or won't? Castillo. She's answered the question. Pro Cop. Annalisa, there are 3 families who don't know where their daughters are. Madonna's parents, Kenrick's mother, Selena's cousin. They've been waiting 8 months. If you know something, anything. Ruiz. I know what waiting is. That was the moment, Prokop said later, when she understood that whatever framework she'd been using was wrong. This was not a suspect refusing to cooperate. This was not a traumatized victim unable to access memories. This was something else, something she'd never encountered in 17 years of investigations. She wasn't hiding information the way guilty people hide it, Prokop said. Guilty people deflect. They offer alternative explanations. They get angry. Annalisa wasn't doing any of that. She was just still, like she'd made peace with a decision that was costing her everything, and she was going to hold it no matter what. The investigation continued without her cooperation. Prokop and Fossey retraced every lead. They pulled Greyhound station surveillance from Reno. The footage showed Annalisa entering the station at 11:40 p.m. on April 18th, alone, already barefoot, already wearing the flannel shirt. She sat in the station for 3 hours before boarding. No one accompanied her. No one dropped her off. Where she'd been before Reno, how she'd gotten there, where she'd spent the preceding months, whether she'd traveled by car, by foot, or by some other means, could not be determined. The trail went cold at the station doors. The flannel shirt was analyzed. It was a Carhartt size XL, available at hundreds of retailers across the western United States. No DNA was recovered from it other than Annalisa's. It had been washed recently, within days of her arrival, with a commercial detergent. Someone had washed that shirt before she put it on. Someone had given it to her. Someone had, in some sense, prepared her for departure. Whoever that person was, Annalisa would not name them. The nylon cord holding up her shorts was identified as 550 paracord, the kind sold at any outdoor supply store. Unremarkable, untraceable. Every physical detail told the same story, deliberate anonymity. Whoever had been with Annalisa, whoever had cut her hair, fed her enough to keep her alive but not enough to keep her healthy, scarred her arms, and finally sent her to a Greyhound station in Reno, had been meticulous about leaving no trace. Or Annalisa had been meticulous about it herself. Prokop couldn't tell which, and the uncertainty was corrosive. In June of 2022, Emeka and Blessing Okafor flew from Sacramento to Klamath Falls and requested a meeting with Annalisa Ruiz. They were accompanied by their eldest daughter, Adana, who was 28 and had left her job as a paralegal to coordinate the family's search efforts. Annalisa agreed to see them. The meeting took place in a conference room at Oren Castillo's law office. No investigators were present, no recording was made. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. When the Okafors emerged, Blessing was weeping. Emeka was not. His face held an expression that Castillo later described as the look of a man who has just been told something in a language he doesn't speak. Adana Okafor gave a brief statement to the press the following day. She read it from a sheet of paper, her voice steady. "We met with Annalisa Ruiz. We asked her about our sister. She cried. She held our mother's hands and she cried. She said she was sorry. She said she loved Madonna. She would not tell us where Madonna is or what happened to her. We believe she knows. We believe she is choosing not to tell us. We do not understand why, and we are not sure we ever will." She paused. Then she added something that was not on the paper. "Annalisa looked at my mother the way you look at someone when you're asking for forgiveness, but you know you can't explain what for. I've never seen that look on a person's face before. I hope I never see it again." Lin Yi did not travel to Oregon. She sent a letter to Annalisa through Castillo's office. The contents have never been made public. Annalisa reportedly read it, folded it carefully, and asked the nurse to put it in her drawer. When asked if she wanted to write back, she said, "I can't." Annalisa Ruiz was never charged with a crime. In September of 2022, the Klamath County DA's office issued a statement acknowledging that while Annalisa was a person of significant interest, there was insufficient evidence to charge her with any offense. She was not compelled to testify as no suspect had been identified and no grand jury convened. She returned to Stockton with her mother. She lives there now in the house where she grew up. She does not work. She does not leave the house often. She has no social media presence. She has declined every interview request. Carmen Ruiz, when reached by a journalist in 2023, said only, "My daughter came home. I thank God for that every day. I pray for the other families every night. I don't have answers, neither does she. That's not the same as not knowing." That last sentence, "that's not the same as not knowing," has been parsed, repeated, and analyzed in every discussion of this case. It is either a mother's careful distinction or a mother's admission. It means Annalisa knows but cannot speak. Or it means Annalisa carries something worse than knowledge, something that has no name, that sits in the space between experience and language, that cannot be converted into information. Prokop retired in early 2024. The case remains open. No remains have been recovered, no suspect has been named. Crater Lake has been searched 4 times by 4 different agencies with 4 different technologies, including side-scan sonar that mapped the lake floor to a depth of 1,600 feet. They found the remains of a 1940s-era research vessel. They found geological formations of significant scientific interest. They did not find Madonna Okafor, Kenrick Yee, or Selena Marsh. The lake keeps its secrets the way it keeps its water, sealed in, fed only by what falls from the sky, releasing nothing. There is a particular cruelty in a story that refuses to end. A body is an answer, however devastating. A confession is an answer. Even a lie is a shape that can be examined, held up to the light, tested against what's known. But silence is not an answer. Silence is a door that stays closed while you stand outside it, knowing that behind it is everything you need to understand, and knowing that the person with the key has chosen, for reasons you cannot access, not to turn it. Annalisa Ruiz has the key. She sits in her mother's house in Stockton with it. 3 families wait on the other side. Gerald Yee still has his daughter's last Instagram post as his phone wallpaper. Blessing Okafor still sets a place for Madonna at Sunday dinner. Jolene Trujillo still drives to Crater Lake once a year, stands at the rim, and looks down into that impossible blue. "I don't know what I'm looking for," Jolene said. "I just feel like someone should come. Someone should stand here and look. Someone should remember that 3 women disappeared into this place, and the only person who knows why won't say." She paused. The lake